Myron, who killed JFK?
It's a combination of three people: Italian Mafia, the CIA, and the Zionists.
Why did they want to kill JFK? He was a good president, first Catholic. What did they have against him?
Well, that's a complex question, but a lot of people wanted JFK gone. We'll start with the CIA. He threatened to smash it into a million pieces because he didn't like all of the rogue operations they had going on. It was a clandestine operation, and they were doing a bunch of things that he disliked internationally. And he didn't like Alan Dulles, the founder of the CIA. For the Mossad, so the Italian Mafia wanted him gone because they felt like they were betrayed. What ended up happening was JFK's father struck a deal with the Italian Mafia to rig the election out of Illinois to help him win a close election against Nixon. What ended up happening was they rigged the election, ensured that he won, because Illinois is obviously a very important state to win. And once JFK came into power and the administration took over, he appointed his brother, RFK, as the Attorney General. As the Attorney General, you're the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. You oversee the FBI, you oversee the Department of Justice, you oversee all the main investigatory agencies. The FBI and the Department of Justice led a probe into the mafia, which they had been trying to avoid for a very long time. Why? Because Hoover was being blackmailed by Mayor Lansky, head of the Jewish mafia, which we're going to talk about them here in a second, and he had pictures of him in heels, and he was also homosexual, which back then was a big deal. You lose your clearance, lose your job, etc. So this is a big reason why the FBI was neutered when it came to investigating the mafia and how they were able to kind of run with impunity for so long. But RFK brought the mafia in, and not only did he bring them in to answer questions, he brought them in with television cameras all over the place. And this was obviously a big deal for them because they've been able to operate with impunity for so long.
So it was sexual blackmail, like Epstein?
Almost, yeah. Yeah. He had compromising photos of him hooking up with his deputy director. And it was widely known that Hoover was gay. It's just that the general public didn't know it.
How were they able to get away with it and call it a conspiracy for so many years?
Well, they've been able to hide behind classifying it and releasing things here and there, changing the names of certain things, and they've been able to kind of avoid it. And the biggest reason why they're still classified, and this is what everyone doesn't want to talk about, is because our greatest ally was absolutely involved in the death of John F. Kennedy and his brother.
Why would our greatest ally kill one of the most beloved presidents of all time?
Because he threatened their nuclear program.
Why was Israel building a nuclear program?
Well, after the Suez Canal crisis in '56, if I'm not mistaken, Israel understood that they needed the nuclear bomb to be able to deter the Arab world from continuing to attack them, and they understood that if they didn't have nuclear superiority in the region, it would greatly affect their ability to exist into the continuing decades. So what ended up happening was they stole uranium from Pennsylvania, out of Apollo, Pennsylvania, from a factory, and they smuggled it to Israel, and they started running a nuclear program out of Dimona, and they did this secretly with the aid of the French.
Are American politicians aware of Israel's involvement in the murder of JFK?
I don't know if the contemporary politicians know, but the politicians back in the day absolutely knew, and they played a role because they wanted him gone. Kennedy had a lot of enemies, to include his vice president, Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson actually strong-armed Kennedy by becoming his vice president because he knew that he had a problem with women. He was a womanizer, and they basically told him, look, if you don't put me on the ticket as your vice president, we're going to come out and expose the fact that you've been committing adultery, which back then in the 60s and 50s, guys, was a big deal. Adultery as a Catholic president would be a death sentence for his political career. Why
would the Italian mob murder JFK if he was the first Catholic president? What did they have to gain from his murder?
The ability to continue to do their crimes in secret. The mafia, they call it the oath of silence, right? Omerta. And they thrive on people not knowing what they do. That's why it's literally called La Cosa Nostra, stands for our thing. And when they say our thing, they truly do mean that. Kennedy was, though he was Catholic, he was Irish. He wasn't Italian. So, when it comes to organized crime in the United States back then, and even to this day, you have to be of Italian descent to be a part of the mafia. Now, the Jewish mafia was able to work with the Italian mafia because they were able to lend in financial assistance, and Mayor Lansky was damn near the bankroll for it alongside Bugsy Siegel, and they worked intimately together because Mayor Lansky was crucial in getting Lucky Luciano out of prison in exchange for a deal with the Office of Naval Intelligence during World War II. But the long story short is Kennedy and his brother, most importantly RFK, compromised the mafia by exposing their illegal activities to the American public, especially in television or on television.
So is this information enough to determine if Israel is our greatest ally or not?
Well, I think the reason why they've been hiding it for so long is because it would clearly prove that they're not our greatest ally, and they've been involved in the assassination of a sitting president. I mean, I find it interesting how the only person that was able to capture the assassination on video was a Jewish Zionist named Abraham Zapruder. And then if you fast forward 40 or 50 years later, in September 11, 2001, who was there to document 9/11? More Jewish Zionists, and dancing at it as well. So I think if the American public understood that our greatest ally might not necessarily be our greatest ally, and that they're there at pivotal times in American history, documenting it for financial gain later on, because Abraham Zapruder sold that video for quite a bit of money in American dollars today, a couple of million, I think he sold it for about 100 to 150K. And if you do that in today's dollars, somewhere around a million or two. I don't think the American public would want to continue to support our greatest ally anymore if they knew this stuff.
How were they able to get away with it? It was televised. There was a big crowd in Dallas. How could they have, with a sniper and everything, what type of military, what did they use to get away with this?
Well, the most important thing is to understand, number one, that Oswald was not the actual shooter. Oswald was a patsy, just like he said. He wasn't even there when all this went down. There were multiple shooters, I think 5 or 6 to be exact. I broke this down on a podcast of mine. But what you need to know is there were people on a grassy knoll, there were people in a book depository, and the shooters were put in a position where they waited till he got to a certain point, and then they started shooting, and it was basically a bloodbath from there. The magic bullet theory is a lie, and now it's put there to kind of build on the lie that there was a single shooter. But Oswald was not the shooter. And as a matter of fact, they knew this. That's why they had to kill him. And the person that went ahead and killed him, Jacob Rubinstein. Not Jack Ruby, Jack Rubinstein. And he confessed to his rabbi and to his doctor that he did it for Israel and for the Jewish people. Why would he need to kill a guy who killed a U.S. president for the Jewish people?
Okay, Myron, who killed JFK?
There were a bunch of different shooters on that day, but the shooters that I'll tell you guys that definitely you need to know about that they'll never tell you about are Jack Valenti and a guy named David Ferry.
Why do they never tell us about them?
Well, Jack Valenti is right there on Air Force One as Lyndon B. Johnson is being sworn in. He's right there in the corner. You see his eyes like this, and he's all sweaty and disheveled. It's because he had just assassinated a sitting U.S. president. He was the one that fired the kill shot.
So who were the others involved if he was the one who shot?
Well, David Ferry also shot at him as well, and the other guys shot from the book depository. They were CIA contractor guys.
How many shooters were there?
Roughly 6 to 8.
All CIA?
Pretty much. The weird thing with the CIA is they don't have actual employees. They have people that are contractors, people that are affiliated, people that are actual real employees. There's different types of employees within the CIA.
So they were contracted by who?
That's what's in the classified documents.
Who do you suspect?
I think it was a combination of multiple entities that wanting him gone, whether it was the Israeli intelligence component with the Mossad or the CIA themselves, because we know that they had an axe to grind with JFK, or the Italian mafia as well, working together. And there's been many documented instances where the mafia would work with intelligence agencies to do their dirty work for them.
What names do you remember that are involved?
Off the top of my head, the ones that they never talk about, Jack Valenti and David Ferry. They were the guys on the grassy knoll. And Jack Valenti was the one that fired the kill shot that blew his head open. Because when you look at the film, you can see the head go back like this. Clearly that shot came from the front, and then the head blew out the back. And I also find it interesting too because the most famous movie that documents all of this was a movie called JFK, directed by Oliver Stone. But then you dig a little bit deeper and you find out Oliver Stone's real name is Silverstein. Then you find out that the person that funded the movie JFK was a guy named Arnon Milchan, billionaire Jewish Zionist. Another fun thing, he was a part of the intelligence program that worked on covering Israel's unacknowledged nuclear program. So let me get this straight. The most important movie and the most popular movie that documents Kennedy's assassination in American culture is a movie that was funded by a Jewish Zionist billionaire that conveniently leaves out the Zionist angle, and he's a part of the intelligence program that Kennedy tried to stop with the nuclear program.
So do you think Oliver Stone knew about this from the jump, or was he also a contracted?
I think he has good intentions, but at the end of the day, the people that foot the bill get to dictate the movie. And in this case, it was a billionaire guy that just so happened to be Israeli intelligence and worked on making sure Israel's nuclear program was never publicly acknowledged.
What was the grassy knoll?
The grassy knoll was an area where there was a fence where people and multiple witnesses said that they heard shots fired from. And it makes sense because when you look at the way JFK was hit and the way that his body and his head pulled back like this, it's very obvious that the shots came from the front. But everyone tries to sit there and say the single bullet theory from the book of depository because that is what makes Oswald the alleged shooter. And that's why they had to kill Oswald, because he wasn't there. And they knew when the evidence actually came out and the Dallas Police Department had to go ahead and figure out who actually killed him, there would have been a problem with them being able to prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So they needed him dead because he would have blew a hole in the entire story. Another funny thing a lot of people don't know, when Oswald was perp walked in front of the Dallas Police Department, he was instructed to be perp walked like that by a guy named Sam Bloom. Who's Sam Bloom? One of the members of the Texas Citizens Council that funded that trip for JFK to come down to Dallas. And who ran the Texas Citizens Council? A bunch of Zionists from the B'nai B'rith, which Abraham Zapruder was also a member of.
Abraham who?
Zapruder, the guy that filmed the entire incident. The Zapruder film.
That's the only video?
It's the only video of the incident. The Zapruder film. So he was there at the perfect time to capture that historic moment. And then when Oswald is killed, he's walked in front of the Dallas Police Department against the instruction of the FBI, by the way, and he's shot by Jack Ruby. And the person that told the Dallas Police Department to move him was another Jewish Zionist.
And who was Jack Ruby?
Jack Ruby was also a Jewish Zionist, really named Jacob Rubinstein. He was the guy that killed Oswald, that couldn't let this secret get out as to who was really behind the assassination. And the other thing that's interesting that a lot of people need to know is that Jack Rubenstein admitted to his rabbi and to other confidentials or confidants that he did it for the Jewish people and for Israel.
What was Lee Harvey Oswald's involvement?
He was just a patsy. He was the fall guy. And this is going to sound crazy, but the Oswald that was at the movie theater when he was captured is not the same Oswald that they think worked at the book depository. Those multiple Oswalds.
Did they get the right one?
No.
What happened to the real Oswald?
The real Oswald wasn't even there. He wasn't at the book depository. And it kind of makes sense because why would they have the patsy who was supposed to take the blame for this that close to the actual event and compromise everything? He was told to go to the movie theater by someone else. And another reason why we know this is because when the police officer was shot, Tippett, if I'm not mistaken, one of the witnesses that saw him get shot said that she saw 2 assailants running after he was shot. One of those guys was a dude named Lawrence.
Who was Lawrence Howard?
Lawrence Howard was actually one of the shooters on the book depository, CIA contractor. He was there when the Oswald, the fake Oswald, one of his body doubles, shot and killed J.D. Tippett, the Dallas police officer. And one of the witnesses that was there was a black woman. She actually said she saw 2 individuals running from the scene after Tippett was killed. The rabbit hole goes very deep with JFK.
Do you think the JFK files will ever be released?
I don't think so, man. I think if the American public knew that a foreign government, Israel, and an intelligence agency, the CIA, and organized crime, the mafia, colluded together to kill a sitting U.S. president, they would never trust the government again. And government trust at its all-time low. The files would only exacerbate the problem.